I'm Pam Sandlian Smith, and I work with Anythink Libraries, and I'm happy to be here today to talk about community engagement. I don't know how you all feel, but that emblem of the town square, especially like the Italian piazza, is the way I think about our work at our library. And so community engagement to us is more than just one thing or one program. It's really a way of life and a way of building that relationship. And that relationship is different sometimes. Sometimes in the town square, you just come and you have a cup of coffee and you talk with a friend. And sometimes you come to be part of this much, much larger event that might be a big deal. And sometimes it's formal, sometimes it's informal, but it's all about being that gathering place that I think that the library is. So one of the things that we did a couple of years ago is we invented the idea of the block party, because Robert Putnam in Bowling Alone talks about communities that do things together, like invite people over for dinner or have a block party, are communities that are more cohesive and more effective. And so we did block parties all around our community, 7 of them in 1 week. It was like planning 7 weddings. One of the things that we did at our block party, we had an event out in a park in North Glen, and our team put together this idea of getting to know your neighbor. And so strangers would just sit together and ask each other questions, which is very similar to what's going on downstairs today with the Any Bubbler Town Square, is that you're simply sitting there and talking to each other and making eye contact and getting to know each other. Another one of our block parties, which this was my favorite actually, was a dog bark brunch. In my neighborhood, which is a new neighborhood in Denver actually, in which everybody has a dog or a kid, and what better way to get to know each other but to bring your dog to a dog brunch. And so we had dog biscuits and all sorts of dog collateral, and we had dog treats, and people made dog Slurpees. But we also had coffee and scones for people that then, when you bring your dog, then you're actually going to get to know all of the people who brought their dogs, and it's such a great way to connect with each other. It's another project that started just shortly after we built our first new library, the Bennett Library, which is a 7,000 square foot library on the Eastern Plains in a farming and ranching community. And the project is called This Is Who We Are, which is public collaborative art. And instead of just doing public art, we wanted to do something that was in collaboration with our community. And the first project we did, we worked with a mixed media artist, Deidre Adams. And so it's a quilt, but it turns out to be an acrylic quilt. And the way we involved our community is people came and they contributed stories. So we collected oral history, and people brought letters and scraps of material, like somebody brought a piece of their wedding dress, and some people brought their shirts. And Deidre collected all of these stories and all of these scraps, and she made it into this beautiful quilt, and then she did the acrylic part over it, and she wove the stories in. And so this was actually at one of the openings of this particular project. And within the quilt, there are sayings like, when I came to Colorado, I didn't know what I was going to do. But when I got here, I knew my life would be on the land. I stepped back and I was just watching people at this opening, and there was this gentleman who was standing there kind of staring at the corner, and I said, well, what do you think about this quilt? And he said, well, that's my shirt up there, but I don't recognize it. This is just one of the ideas of telling the story and engaging, and we still have that oral history of all those stories talking about their relationship to living in this particular part of the country. This is another collaborative public art project called The Wish, in which we connected with a paper arts artist, and she had this idea of collecting wishes from all over the world, which when we connected with her, she already had about 100 wishes. So it was such an amazing idea. And what she did is she made all of this paper. It's actually the idea of a dandelion when it goes to seed. And I don't know if you still do this, but when I was a kid, you pick the dandelion, you make a wish, and you blow it. We collected wishes from our community, and we actually made a recording of some of these wishes. So this is hanging in one of our branches, and when people walk in, it's motion sensitive. That recording of the wishes goes off. And one of the wishes is a woman saying, "I wish I could have a cup of tea with my mom one more time." And one of the wishes is his father talking with his daughter, and he said, "I wish to be a ninja, but that's what my daughter wants to do, so I stole her wish." And so this is one of the ways that we engage with our community, is to collect their stories and somehow represent them so that people feel a sense of belonging. This is a project that the team did last year, which is the kitchen table. And if you remember growing up, and maybe it's still the same way in your home, in my house, we had the living room where my dad sat and watched football. But everybody gathered around the kitchen table, which is like the kitchen was smaller and we were all kind of squished in there, but everybody wanted to be in the kitchen. And of course, Mom was trying to cook and we were trying to help her, but everybody just wanted to be in the kitchen together to share a story or just catch up with each other. And so at the library, the team put together a kitchen table in which the idea was for people to come in and actually talk with each other. And again, there were prompts, and people who didn't know each other would come in and talk. We'd have a pot of tea on the kettle going always. So it's that replica of the kitchen table because people want to talk with each other. One of my favorite projects is the baking bread project, and one of our guides at Anythink, Maria Mayo, is just one of the most brilliant librarians. She started a project called Community Connections, and she started it off with baking bread, because what better way to understand other cultures but through food? And so the first event was an event in which we had about 6 different kinds of bread, and then we had a person bringing Middle Eastern bread, we had a person bringing French bread, we had a person who had gluten-free bread, and people got a chance to share their stories about what bread meant to those cultures growing up, how important bread is to their culture, to their family, and then shared stories around food and their culture. I think, librarians, we always love to have gatherings where there's food. But to have this opportunity of connecting with each other through food and culture is an entree to getting to know people that you might not normally talk to, who might come from a different background. We've been working with the Aspen Institute Better Arguments project, and last summer we were one of 2 sites that we were kind of beta for this Better Arguments. And what the Aspen Institute was looking for is to create a template of bringing people together to talk about topics that might be hot topics. And our topic was tech booms and tech tensions in Denver, because in Denver and the suburbs, technology companies moving in is really creating a lot of inequity and disparity, actually, between the haves and the have-nots. And so we had over 100 people gathered in this room. We spent from about 9 in the morning till about 1:30 or 2 in the afternoon, having these guided conversations about talking to people who might disagree with you about growth and technology. And then we served lunch, and people had this big gab, and nobody wanted to go home. And I think that that's one of the things that libraries do well, is we create that safe space that people actually love to come to the library, because people are yearning to talk to each other, and not necessarily just the people that agree with you. We've got to have space where we can talk these things through. Another project that the teams worked on is Civic Saturdays. Eric Liu wrote a book, You're More Powerful Than You Think. And he actually came and did a presentation for us about a year and a half ago. Civic Saturdays is something that he's working on, in which it's kind of like church at the library. And Saturday mornings, people come together, and the idea is civic citizenship. And so somebody does like about a 30-minute sermon. There's music, and then people break up in groups. And this one was in January. They actually had civic resolutions. So everybody kind of like on Post-it note wrote down what their resolution was for civic citizenship. Like, take your kids with you when you go vote, or work on a campaign, or make sure that you're door knocking to make sure everybody is part of the census count. So my husband went. I was actually out of town for this one. And my husband went, and I called him. He was kind of my spy. I said, "What do you think?" And he goes, I said, "How do you feel?" And he said, "I feel inspired." So that's what it's all about. As part of our Civic Saturday, we worked with the elections office, the census folks locally, and the DCPA, which is the Denver Center for the Performing Arts. And one of the things that happened is people registered, and when they registered and they showed up, they actually got a 50% off ticket to go see a play local in Denver, which is 2050. Which is a story about fast forward ahead in 2050, in which the Hispanic Latino population is the majority population. Anyway, it turned out to be the most amazing play, and I project it's going to be on Broadway before the next 2 or 3 years. But one of the ways we engage people is to actually do the Post-it notes, in which people can write what do they think is going to happen in 2050. Really, really, really easy, simple way to engage people. So I'm going to close with an idea that we worked with just a week ago, actually. We had an all-staff training day, and we brought in Patricia Martin, and she talked to us about libraries and our role in bringing wonder to our community. And she talks about librarians being really the pathfinders and the folks that are bringing our communities together in this time that people are feeling so desperate and so disconnected. And she's like, you are the future. The librarians are the future to bring people together, because you bring wonder to your community every day. And one of the things that I want you all to be mindful of is, for all of us who do this work, and it's wonderful work, it's also challenging work, it's the kind of work that you have to re-nourish. You have to constantly nourish yourself. And so it's not just good enough to bring wonder to our communities. We have to find ways to bring wonder back in our own lives.